Good evening. Today is the 15th of July, 2017. This is the Society for the New Humanist Paradigm, and we have some things to discuss tonight. My name is Paul Humanist. So essentially, in a synopsis, all roads lead to LaRouche's four laws, or implementing LaRouche's four laws, and through that, the discovery of the nature of mankind for all humanity. So the battle going on in the world is far more profound than what appears on the surface, or even what appears in our own publications. It is a battle first and foremost over the self-identity of the human race. I will go through first the theological dimension of the battle currently developing over the nature of human identity. And from there I'll go through the cultural component, plus the theological aspect of that battle of different cultures shaped by battles over this issue. From there I'll go into how the cultural and theological battles are expressed in the economic policies that are being adopted. I will then go through the strategic situation from that standpoint, or give you an update. Now, the theological battle. I'll start with some very peculiar statements that were made by Pope Francis on Russia and U.S. working together. His statement was that the potential Russia-U.S. alliance is the greatest threat to the human race. Because it will hurt immigrants. It will hurt, he said a whole bunch of things that didn't make any sense. And that this is the greatest threat to humanity. Okay? And the Pope also compared this to the very bad Syrian-Russian alliance and the Chinese-North Korean alliance. Well, the Chinese are not allied with North Korea. So the Pope is very not with it. And since Assad is the one protecting the Catholics in Syria, for him to have this very negative attitude towards Syria is very interesting. Now, the Pope is attacking Russia, China, and the U.S., especially if the U.S. joins Russia in an alliance. In the Catholic Church, the Pope has the final say in matters of doctrine and theology. 90% of the Catholics may disagree with the Pope, but it's not a democratic issue. He is the Pope, and his doctrines are infallible. It doesn't mean that you agree with those doctrines, but you're going to have to wait until the next Pope before you change those doctrines, because that next Pope's doctrines aren't infallible. So, now, two Jesuits centered in France. I don't have their names, I just found out about today. And the Pope is a Jesuit. Have accused the people around Trump, Steve Bannon and a whole bunch of other people, as being dominionists. Now, what they're saying is that these people, whether they're right or wrong in the way they interpret it, are subscribing to the concept in Genesis, the view that man has dominion over nature. Be fruitful, multiply, and subdue the earth. Now, this could also apply to Chinese culture and Chinese civilization, where all under heaven belongs to the people. And that is a very key part of Confucianism. All under heaven belongs to the people. And in both those conceptions, there's a conception that human beings are not animals, but rather human beings have dominion or have sovereignty over nature. And in the case of Chinese, it's the collectivity of mankind that all under heaven belongs. There are similar concepts in Islam and other religions. The theological war being run by the British oligarchy and their European cousins has been going on for some time. It involves the creation and a resurrection of the kind of theological operations that ruled Rome. Gibbons is a historian who did the rise and fall of the Roman Empire. He did an extremely extensive study. And in that study, he was trying to determine the cause of the decline of the Roman Empire. And the reason he was trying to determine the cause of the decline of the Roman Empire was because the people that were sponsoring him were planning to create an empire that would not fall. The British Empire, or this was the British East India Company crowd that was sponsoring him. And he came to the conclusion that the rise of Christianity and the ideas of man in the image of God, that the idea of human reason, a human reason which can understand universal law, the idea of natural law, that the universe is lawful, both physically and morally. Similar concepts also dominate Chinese culture, that these were the threats to any future empire, and that Christianity brought Rome down, is what he's saying. Or Christianity corrupted Rome. So from that standpoint, the powers that were creating the British Empire around the turn of the century, 1800, made note of the need to begin to dismantle Christianity, or anything that resembled Christianity, or anything of that nature, from that standpoint. Now, since the beginning of the rise of the British East India Company at the end of the 1700s, every effort has been made to promote the hatred of reason in all forms, from religious fundamentalism to New Age mysticism and witchcraft to Dionysian sex, drugs, and violence, modeled on the cult of Dionysius in ancient Greece. Romanticism was one such thing that began to be promoted in the culture following this period. And postmodernism is a continuation of that, is an attack on the Abrahamic, Judeo-Christian, Islamic, Confucian concept of man. In other words, take for example, today, as an example, the worship of the environment, the idea of Gaia, the idea of Mother Earth, the spiritual, this was the spiritual center of the ecological movement, had similar Roman cult equivalents. The collapse of reason is the intention for this, and the collapse of the powers of reason in the population. Mind you, we come out of a period of superstition and people believing in witchcraft and magic and ghosts and demons and everything else like that as causal factors. But then you have Christianity, and Islam, and to some degree Judaism and Confucianism. You have traditions that are actually rational, that say human beings can know, they can discover, and they can create. However, it's not to say that these societies that claim to be based on these religions of this conception of man actually practice this, but it was always there in the potential. Now, traditional societies are fixed in their economic potential. However, once on the path of scientific and technological progress, the best of these traditional cultures have now a way of demonstrating the power of human reason through the scientific realm and through economic development as an affirmation of their most advanced theology in their culture and religion. Thus, all these religions have become battle zones in this theological war. All these religions and the best traditions of these religions and the best aspects of these religions religions, have been under massive assault for over 200 years. And that's what you're dealing with. Now, so that's what's being determined in this period, is the outcome of the battle that this has been going on. The oligarchy does not want a population that can reason, that can think for themselves. They don't want that. They will do everything possible to destroy that. And when you come to the situation that we're now in, they are facing a powerful threat that in part is coming from the work of Lyndon LaRouche, but it's the combination of the best of the traditional cultures with the scientific and technological revolution. That is what they face. Now, it's important to understand that the direction of a rational approach to economic development of the type LaRouche has advocated, now contained in the 4 laws and parallel to what China is actually doing, profoundly intersects the theological battle over the issue of the theological idea of the nature of man. Is a man merely another animal to be ruled, to be enslaved, to be whatever? Or is human beings rational and have a capability of developing powers of reason? It is not simply that economic development is a good thing, but that it tends to make people more developed, more rational, less superstitious, less fearful, more confident that humans have the potential to solve the problems that arise. In China, we have the idea of progress being coupled with the idea of a Chinese civilizational renaissance, which is what the Chinese dream is of Xi Jinping. It's a civilizational renaissance. But it's being informed by the West, the best scientific tradition that is coming out of the West. In Russia, we have the idea of scientific and technological progress and the discoveries in science no longer in a communist materialist orientation, but from a Russian Orthodox view, that these gifts of discovery are sacred and glorious gifts of God through human beings. That's because the Orthodox Church does not believe these things come from God. These things come from God, not so much human beings, but comes from God through human beings. But still, though, a mankind which is pious in search of the truth and humble will receive these gifts from God. So that's a different twist from the Western view, but nonetheless it is still being informed by the gifts of scientific and technological progress. And thus, these are two critical notions or civilizations whose traditional cultures are having a rebirth in a new and more invigorated form, dumping the fixed society that existed under that religion in the past to a society that's increasingly developing economically, scientifically, but it's occurring within a transformation of a previous traditional culture. So we're in the final stages of a profound theological battle, and it is very important for people to know that, and it is not about your religion, including atheism. It is whether you believe humans have the power of reason. So it's not about your religion, okay? And which religion is right. It's about whether you believe human beings have the power of reason. Now, in the current situation, so keep in mind what I just said, and we'll go now to the current situation. Two things have come out in comments that have been made that are very telling, perhaps telling. One comment is by Trump the other day at a press conference with Macron, the president of France, where a Chinese reporter asked him about what he thinks of Xi Jinping. And he said, Xi is a man of quality who loves China. A very special person. And earlier he said that Putin wants what's good for Russia, and I want what's good for the United States. And then the other comment was made by Putin about Trump. He said that Trump is not at all like what you see in public. He's a very different person. He's very open and listens very well. He has he hears an argument, takes it into account. If he disagrees, he will explain his disagreement. And what is Putin saying about Trump? He's saying that Trump is a reasonable person, very different than what you might see in him in his public image. Now, Putin is, if anything, is very guarded usually in what he says. He doesn't bullshit. And for him to say something like that as an observation means that he sees Trump not as an ideologue. That Trump is willing to listen and discuss rationally. So I'm saying this is peeking out of the whole situation, that what you see emerging is a dialogue between Russia and the United States based upon what's in their mutual interests. It is not anywhere near where it must be, but there is a sense that Trump is not an ideologue. He's not possessed by, you know, some desire to do this or that. He's not possessed, in other words. And now, something else is interesting in this situation is that France, you know, that Macron invited Trump to the Bastille Day. They had a press conference, and the British are now attacking Macron as not going against Trump, but rather seeking to make France his principal European partner at the expense of the British. So essentially, the French president, who is known to be a profound opportunist, is moving for the opportunity to bring France closer in with the United States and make France more connected to the United States for the, you know, rather than, and not have the British run it. And so maybe the French want to run it, I don't know. But these are very key developments between Russia, China, and now France. However, Trump is surrounded by horrible people. I mean horrible people. Nikki Haley. We can never trust Russia. She's completely ruled by Russophobia. She's psychotic. She's the secretary to the United. I mean, she's the foreign envoy to the United Nations. Then there's Pompeo at the CIA, where Trump asked him point blank to his face, "Did the Syrian government? Are you absolutely certain that the Syrian government committed the chemical weapons attack? Are you certain?" All Pompeo could say, "We have high confidence."
Highly unlikely.
High confidence.
It's highly unlikely because the pilot...
No, I understand that. No. He's telling Trump, "I have high confidence." And that Trump knows he's lying. I mean, everybody knows that you're lying, right? Our military knows that he's lying, right?
But if Trump knows that he is lying, why did he order those attacks?
Because probably he might not have known at that time that he was lying. Maybe, yeah, I don't want to get into that. I'm just saying that there's horrible people around Trump. And then there's McMaster. You know, he wants to keep all the wars going because he believes he has a strategy that can win. And he will undermine and screw up what Trump is trying to do with Russia. And lastly, you have Mnuchin, the Treasury Secretary. He is 1,000,000% Wall Street. I wasn't sure before, but now it's pretty clear. And I used to think that, you know, you needed somebody who understood how those guys worked in order to run operations. But I've come to the conclusion that that's not the case. That he is using the Treasury to independently run sanctions on Russia and China, and that he is in charge of the financial side of the Trump administration, at Treasury, and that he is 1,000,000% of the Wall Street. Okay, so now we go to Stephen Cohen, who said on Fox, Tucker Carlson, he was asked about, Professor, he was asked the question, the first thing you notice is just how much the press is rooting for this meeting between our president and the Russian president to fail. Why would they want it to fail? And Cohen's answer is kind of pornography. Just as there's no love in pornography, there is no national interest in this bashing of Trump and Putin. And he said that his caption for the summit would be potentially new historic anti-Cold War partnership begun by Trump and Putin, but meanwhile attempts to sabotage it escalate. Now, in an article in The Nation, Cohen wrote that the four main achievements of the summit were: 1, formalizing and symbolizing the new détente partnership between the American and Russian presidents; 2, agreement to cooperate in Syria against terrorist forces there, not only in the limited ways announced, but in more expansive ways, which meant agreeing with Moscow that Syrian president must remain at least until ISIS is fully defeated; 3, creating a bilateral U.S.-Russian channel for negotiating the settlement of the Ukrainian civil and proxy war, thereby bypassing or reducing the role played thus far by Germany and France, which has largely failed; and 4, agreeing to discuss ways to limit the dangers of cyber technology in international affairs. So, meanwhile, the Chinese are everywhere, including Canada, and we will get to that later. They're pushing business, trade, development. In the U.S., the China Energy Fund Committee of Patrick Ho teamed up with us a week ago, last Friday, for a conference on food for peace, food for thought in New York City. We had a joint conference with them, and with high-level delegation of academics from China involved in agriculture, who at the same time were making a major intervention at the United Nations on creating the food supply necessary to sustain humanity and help get humanity better fed. The UN always in the past has set these targets mainly as lip service for when, eradicating hunger, eradicating poverty. It's all lip service. And the UN, and of course the UN personnel that work for the UN, they become very demoralized because it's all, the major powers inside the UN have not been, really serious about it. Now, the Chinese are not doing lip service and intend to make the UN assist in greatly increasing food production for humanity. The lead guy in the delegation attacked the most famous agricultural scientist, policy guy of the establishment, Lester Brown. He is the leading Malthusian agricultural expert who wrote an alarmist book in 1996, Who Will Feed China? Wake-up call for a small planet. The Chinese feed China, and now 50% of their grain production goes to raise meat for the population. So the Chinese are putting together an entire reconstruction program for Syria. Russia, Iran, and Syria firms will have their first dibs, but the rest can come in after that. Syria will be a key part of the Belt and Road. Okay, now we come to the U.S. situation and the increased media spectacle around Donald Trump Jr., which is now looking more like a setup. And it seems like all the roads lead to GPS fusion, a front for what appears to be a front for the MI6 interface with the FBI. This also brings up Executive Order 12333 from the Reagan period, under which all kinds of private entities can be used covertly by government for operation. So this is all now getting mixed in together with all the hysteria. So you have the hysteria and the counter to the hysteria. And it's just mushrooming. And so the Trump crowd will counterattack. They're counterattacking with whatever evidence they're getting, and plus they're also counterattacking with Ukraine interfered in the U.S. elections on behalf of Hillary Clinton. So all of that's going on. Now on the economy, I think this is very important to know. You have the tale of two financial systems emerging. China's banks generated $10 trillion in credit, and an increasing amount of that is being channeled abroad through the Belt and Road. They built 22,000 kilometer high-speed rail in China. This is what they're using to develop. So these are loans. This is credit by the Chinese banking system. Now the transatlantic nations, including Japan, have issued 15 trillion in cumulative quantitative easing, with industrial collapse, growing poverty, unemployment, suicide, and alcohol and drug deaths. So you have definitely a tale of two financial systems. An example of this is fusion research. What's the ITER stand for in Europe?
ITER.
Huh?
ITER.
What does it stand for? International Tomahawk.
Chinese.
I don't know. Doesn't matter. The Chinese are part of it. And ITER has been delayed. Their first experiments have been pushed back to 2025. China, with South Korea and Japan, are already working on engineering a test reactor way in advance of that. Song Yun Tao says they plan to double plasma times every 16 to 17 months. Right now, the last one was at 102 seconds. China is ahead, he says, because their ability to mass produce superconductor wire for magnets. They're able to mass produce it. So that just gives you an example. Now, so I just look at this New York situation, which is a disaster. So Donald Trump's Secretary of Commerce, through the Transportation Infrastructure Finance and Innovation Act program, federal funds are now going to a planned new Farley Hall train station and mall project. It will include a 150,000 square foot new station for Amtrak and Long Island Rail trains, but an 850,000 square foot mall, renting out office space of 700,000 square feet, and retail stores, 150,000 square feet. The station will be across from New York's 8th Avenue from the existing Penn Station, which it will not replace or expand, but merely supplement. And beyond this particular grant, another $1.3 billion in public funds for this project, which will be operated by private companies, are coming from area transit agencies and from New York State. Thus, nearly $2 billion in public funds are being committed to build, not new lines or tunnels, but merely a relatively small station for trains. The main result is a huge new office retail mall of the type facing bankruptcy all over the United States. And so forth. And the lead company involved is Vornado Realty, whose CEO, Stephen Roth, is the leader of President Trump's so-called infrastructure task force. So far has come up with no proposal for the nation for funding Trump's promised infrastructure. So that gives you a sense of where that stands. And that is not going to go. And Fortune magazine had an article saying that the private-public partnerships are always a disaster. They will always be a disaster. The public puts up the money, the private sector invests in it, and then when the private sector goes bankrupt, when the private sector dumps it, the government picks up the tab. And nothing is really, nothing positive is really done with it. Nothing good comes out of private-public partnership. So that's the situation that you have on the economics. You have a disaster in the economic area around Trump. So you have the disaster of people in his administration, and you have the disaster of the economic side of it. Okay, and Trump this is what he came in with. And then you have if that wasn't bad enough, you have Janet Yellen, who was asked a question in congressional testimony about Glass-Steagall. And she said that Glass-Steagall is what caused Bear Stearns and Lehman Brothers to collapse.
Didn't exist.
And they were a product of Glass-Steagall. That maintaining the connection between deposits and investment is the only way to keep things going. So she's right. It's the only way to keep the criminal scum machine going. So they have the Federal Reserve, you have Mnuchin, you have the economic situation under control, under their control, and right now there's no way that Trump can, in that configuration, there's no way that Trump can carry out any kind of economic policy that's going to benefit the country. And at some point, he's going to lose support from the base if he cannot. Now, so now we come to how do you deal with that situation? Okay. Okay, the Democratic Party. We've been working with a lot of people in the Democratic Party, some Republicans, but mostly Democrats, over a period of a decade in terms of promoting Glass-Steagall. So we have a pretty good sense of the Democratic members of Congress and the Democratic elected officials in the state legislatures who have that orientation. They may not agree with us on a lot of other things, but they have an orientation that the nation has been run by financial has been run by criminals. In Seattle, for instance, there's a mayoralty candidate that I'm supporting. His name is Bob Hasegawa. He was one of the 2 state legislators in the state of Washington that we've worked with over the years in the state legislature and at the national conferences of the state legislatures to promote Glass-Steagall. And he's talking about creating a public bank, Seattle Public Bank, in order to fund public housing. And his supporter, one of his main supporters, is another state senator who was working with us. And when I talked to him about the Republican versus Democrats, he says no. He says there's Wall Street Republicans and Wall Street Democrats. There's anti-Wall Street Republicans and anti-Wall Street Democrats. And he's been saying that for a long time. So he's running for mayor. Now, okay, so essentially, here's where the people come in, the population comes in. I went to a pullover spot next to a Costco where people can pull out of the driveway, and if they want to talk, they can drive their car and park right there and talk to me. We haven't done pullover sites for a long time. And we had pullover site where we had our big sign saying that stop the coup against Trump, defend Trump, right? And I was wanting to get a sense of what people were thinking. And this was in a this was in the suburb of Washington, of Seattle. This is primarily working people. And I was stunned at the overwhelming response of people driving by with thumbs up and relative to the finger, and I was totally overwhelmed by the hatred of the media that is developing in the population. Now, this is important because within the Democratic Party there are many people now in the party system and in the party structure, and like the Lieutenant Governor of California who's running for governor this year, he is saying let's cut this Russia stuff. It's not helping us. It's not doing well with the population. We're going to lose elections. We're not going to take any state houses if we continue this. We need to change the direction. I talked to one of the leading Democrats at a hamburger arrangement in my district a week ago, and when I talked to him about it, I said, look, Jeff, I mean, this thing's got to end. The Democratic Party has got to make a hard FDR turn and just go for the FDR. And if Trump wants to jump on it, that's up to him. But the Democratic Party has to make this jump. And he said, yeah, I think, and he never agreed with me on anything. And this is the first time he agreed with me. So this is developing in the population. The question is, can enough of these people come together and pull off a coup and do it? I don't see it happening at this point, but the pressure is building in that direction. I talked to the party state chair and the week before, 2 weeks before, and I had a brief conversation with her at the end of an event, and I talked to her, and she said, yeah, I mean, the situation is not good, and they're trying to win the state Senate with a candidate, and they need one more candidate to win the state Senate, and she seemed very worried that they weren't going to get it because of all this. And this is in a district that has in the past been Democratic, but went Republican because of the Democratic Party has gone absolutely green, has gone absolutely nuts. You know, LBGTs, and these are Democrats who are not LGBT or green, and so they went Republican. So this is going on in the Democratic Party. Now, so that's one side. Now, if that were to happen, then there would be an opportunity for Trump to have some support for the 4 laws, LaRouche's 4 laws. And there's no dispute that among those people who someone open the door? There's no dispute.
There's a culprit wants to get in.
Yeah. There's no dispute at this time that that the kind of policies required for the United States represent a total overhaul of everything. But on a deeper level, it's why do you have an economy in the first place? And again, you get back to the theological issues of why do you have a nation in the first place? Why do you have an economy in the first place? Is it there to make everybody rich? Is it there to be looted, plundered, whatever? I mean, we have a total profound collapse in the culture in the United States. So nothing short of a profound change is going to make it possible to carry this out. And the profound change has to come within the people's identity, and something has to pop out of the situation. Now, I personally believe Trump is capable of moving the United States in that direction. But whether he will or whether he can is another issue. But I think he's demonstrated at least a certain mettle, a certain willingness to fight on certain levels. Now, we come to the second thing, where the opportunity exists, is when everything collapses. Okay, you have a collapse. The system collapses. You have a couple of weeks to then go before the people and say, okay, the thing collapsed. This is what you have to do, and you have to do it now or else. And then you do what FDR did. You do exactly what FDR did. You know what FDR said? He got up there. I mean, the whole country collapsed. The banks had collapsed. Everything had collapsed. And FDR, if you listen to his inaugural speech in March of 1933. 33. March of 33. He said, the money changers have lost their high seat in the temple of our civilization. It is up to us now to establish what has to be done. And if the Congress won't pass it, I will use martial law. In effect, that's what he said. And he was serious. He wasn't joking.
Absolutely.
Ready to call on the bonus marchers, right?
Huh?
He was ready to call on the bonus marchers.
He was ready to do anything.
All the veterans.
He was ready to do it all. Now, that's the situation we might be in if the system goes like it did under FDR. And therefore, either way it works, or a combination of our promotion of the 4 laws is absolutely essential to creating the potential for that to occur. And so, and of course you know what the 4 laws are: the Glass-Steagall, the credit system, the investment in the real development of the nation, not these boondoggles, not these malls or whatever. And of course it's the science driver orientation. Now that is, all roads lead to that, because that's what you're going to have to do. That's what the United States is going to have to do. China has already moved in that direction. Russia has not yet fully moved in that direction, but other nations will have to move in that direction. It's not arbitrary. This is not an arbitrary issue. They're either going to do it or they're going to die, or they're not going to survive. So, but whether or not it's done depends on the preliminary groundwork that we lay.